Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. And we at STP truly hope that you all are doing very well and taking good care of yourself and staying safe. With that said, welcome to our today's episode of the STP Training Webinar Series. The title for our talk today is Principles to Guide Testing, Modern and Agile. Our guest speaker today joining us on the webinar is Lisa Crispin. I'm Smita Mishra. I'm a tester myself and a sustainability enthusiast too. And I'm excited to host you all and Lisa on our STP webinars. Before we get started with the webinar, let me quickly share an important update that may interest you. There is an upcoming webinar, Quality Focused Software Testing in Critical Infrastructure. On the 27th of May, the speaker is Zoe Owens, who is the firmware test engineer at Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories. In this webinar, Zoe will explain how to focus on quality without breaking the bank when it comes to critical infrastructure. It sounds like an interesting webinar to me. So the link is up for you to register. Please do go for it. Also, we are inviting proposals for STP webinars from all of you, and this shall be open all year round, so you can submit anytime you're ready. All the details along with the submission form are at the link given on the screen. Please do go through them. In case you have recommendations on topics or speakers, do email them to us. We will be very happy to hear from you. All right, let's get started with the webinar today. Welcome, Lisa. We are very excited to have you with us today. And let me quickly introduce you for all of us here. Lisa Crispin is the co-founder at Agile Testing Fellowship, and she's the Observability Practitioner at OutSystems. Lisa is also the co-author with Janet Gregory of 3 books, Agile Testing Condensed, A Brief Introduction, More Agile Testing, Learning Journeys for the Whole Team, and Agile Testing, A Practical Guide for Testers and Agile Teams. She also offers training courses through the Agile Testing Fellowship, and I'll let her tell more about these trainings. Something that doesn't come as a surprise is that Lisa was voted by her peers as the most influential Agile testing professional person at Agile Testing Days in 2012. Please visit lisacrispin.com and agiletester.ca for more. Now let's get started. Let's start learning the principles to guide testing, modern and agile. Lisa, the floor is all yours. And yes, we can see your screen.
Thank you so much, Smita. That was a wonderful introduction. And I'm really loving this webinar series that you've been putting on, and hope that there will be a lot more great submissions to that. So today I'd like to talk about something we've had in a long time, which is principles to guide our work, and in particular, the agile testing principles and the modern testing principles. And so Janet Gregory has contributed this, and I'm also using some work from Alan Page and Britt Jensen. I've been lucky to work as a hands-on tester, mostly on small cross-functional teams, and for the last 20 years, and also extremely fortunate to collaborate with Janet Gregory on several books, as Smita mentioned, and a 5-hour online video course, and also a live training course, which as an in-person course, that's a 3-day live course. We have just adapted that to make it work as a remotely facilitated course and change the timing on it so that it's more sustainable. You can't really spend 3 full days looking at your computer screen. So if you'll go to agiletestingfellow.com, you can learn more about that course. Would have been good if I'd put that on the slide, but you can get in touch with me as well if you can't find that. My current job, which I just started recently, is at OutSystems and helping to build an observability practice, be able to ask questions of our production system in production. So it's the new frontier for testing, in my opinion. So that's where I really want to learn about it. And so do check out our course if you're interested. Janet will be doing that remotely next month, and to learn from the best from Janet is an awesome opportunity, and it's limited to 10 people. So so be sure to go to agiletestingfellow.com and check it out, or contact me. Oh, and for those of you who don't know me, I spend a lot of my free time with my donkeys here on our farm in Vermont, and we do a lot of driving and work around the farm with the donkeys and walking and playing. So they're very agile donkeys. So this came about because Alan Page and Britt Jensen, they have a really good testing podcast called the A/B Testing Podcast, A/B for their names, not for the practice of A/B testing. And I listened to all the episodes over, gosh, really over a couple of years, where they formulated their what they now call their modern testing principles. And I would recommend for you to go to their podcast and listen to that to get the full context. I think it starts about episode 80. I'm not really 100% sure, but I'm going to talk about both Janet's and my 10 principles for agile testers and Alan and Brent's modern testing principles, and talk about how those relate and how they can help you and your team in testing and building quality in. So let's start with the 10 principles for agile testers. So in our first book, Agile Testing, we introduced these principles, and at the time, this was more than 10 years ago, most testers were still part of a siloed testing team and working in a more phased and gated environment where testing was a phase at the end of development. And we were just starting this mindset shift to, well, not just starting, some of us, but a lot of people were just starting the mindset shift to testing being a continual process, and to testing being more about bug prevention than bug detection. And so we came up with these principles with a lot of feedback from the community, and we included them in a handout called the Quick Tools for Agile Testing, which is available on agiletester.ca, and that's downloadable in 10 languages, so we're pretty proud of that. And there are other tools on here too, like the Agile Testing Quadrants, the Test Automation Pyramid, Key Success Factors. And over the years, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from people who said these principles really helped guide them. And of course, testing and quality are the responsibility of the whole delivery team. So these principles really apply to everyone on the team, because everybody should be participating in some testing activities. And they're still relevant and useful today. I kind of wish now that we called them just 10 agile testing principles, but times are different and we all evolve. But the principles remain useful. I still follow these principles. Now, I mentioned Alan Page and Britt Jensen have come up with their principles for testing in the modern world of continuous delivery and deployment in the last few years. And when I started listening to their podcast, they said, oh yeah, we really like what's in Lisa and Janet's books. We feel like that's the foundation for testing in modern environments and applications, but they saw a need for some new skills. For example, nowadays we're able to collect huge amounts of data about how customers are using our product in production. And so knowing some data science and being able to use tools that help us analyze all this big data is really helpful to us. So those are some new skills we need to learn and see how customers are actually using our products, what problems they're having, how can we focus our testing and make sure they get the value they need. Alan and Brent want testers, and in our book, Janet and I talked about testers in as advocates and as assistants, helping the team learn testing skills across the board. Everybody on the team joining in testing, helping them learn how to build quality in. And Alan and Brent see this even more fully into a coaching role. And so they settled on these principles. I'm not going to talk about really the practical application of these, but Melissa Eden recently did a webinar for testing UI on the practical application, and I've got a link to that in my resources slide at the end. So let me explain these in a little more detail. Oh, Alan and Brent, they really see the big problem, and I'm sure many of you have this problem or have experienced this problem, that developers often view the testers or quality assurance professionals as a safety net. So they say, oh yeah, I'm going to write my code, and good old Lisa's over there and she's going to test my code and she'll catch any bugs. And they compared this to, the circus. So the circus performers, the tightrope walker or the acrobats, they have a safety net. And so if they fall, they won't hurt themselves too seriously. And unfortunately, too many times, and I've done this myself, we testers become the safety net for the developers. So they don't really have to care about improving their skills. They don't have to care about their code correctness because somebody else will take care of that. So Alan and Brent say, let's take away that safety net. What happens now? Well, we don't want anyone to die. So let's lower that tightrope to, maybe 6 inches off the ground. And now those developers can improve their skills. They can learn to write testable code, maintainable code, correct code, and do practices like test-driven development that are shown to prevent 80% of the bugs that we normally run into without it. So, and then as time goes on, you can raise the tightrope back up because they've gained that expertise. And I really like that metaphor or analogy. I'm not sure which that is. And so here are their principles. So the first three are improving the business. That makes sense. As testers, we want our customers to be happy. We want our business to succeed. The second one is using things like lean thinking, things from the lean world, theory of constraints, to identify bottlenecks and handoffs and waste, and try to get those out of the system so we can have quick feedback loops. The continuous improvement, obviously that's a cornerstone of Agile development and DevOps, so that's a great way that we can contribute as testers. The quality culture, really important. We know how difficult culture change can be, and Agile and DevOps really are a lot about the culture and about the people. So we can help nurture the team and nurture that quality culture. Number 5, this one has been the most controversial as far as I've heard. People are kind of arguing about it, which is that the customer should be the judge of quality. There's some years ago I would have also argued with this. I'm on board with this idea now, but I can see the different perspectives on it. Using data. So I talked about how we need to learn data science skills and learn to use the analytics tools that help us understand customer usage, observability, things like that. And we help the rest of the team, people who aren't testers, we help them learn different testing skills. And of course, we know there are lots and lots of different testing skills. And Alan and Brent really envisioned that this should or could eliminate the need for any kind of dedicated testing specialist. I personally don't agree with that. I think that we can't all be experts in everything, and that depending on the product domain, most teams would need testing specialists, just like they may need data specialists or platform engineering specialists or design specialists. I mean, we need specialists on the team. We should all be transferring our skills with each other, but that's their principle. So how do the agile testing, and I'm going to refer to those as AT in the next slides, and the modern testing or MT principles relate? Or do they relate? Well, you're probably going to guess that I'm going to find ways they relate. So let's go through them one by one and talk about that. And as we go, I hope you'll think about what principles resonate with you, which ones that you already do. These aren't new, so many of you have probably been doing many of these principles or following many of these principles for years, because there's nothing really new here. But putting them together in this context is a little bit different. So feedback, testers, we're experts at providing feedback, and we need continuous feedback for continuous improvement. So modern testing principle 1 is the business first, and principle 3 is always learning and improving. We need short feedback loops, especially for teams that are trying to move towards continuous delivery and deployment. So Janet and I have always encouraged practices like pair programming and mob programming. Those are the shortest possible feedback loops because you're right there together, whether you're in a room physically or virtually, as we all are now. And so provide feedback as quickly as you can. My first choice is always if I can show the developer as soon as I see an issue or have a question, ask that developer to hop on a Zoom call with me and so I can show them. That's not always possible, and if it can't be fixed right away or if I'm concerned we might forget about it, I'll put it in the defect tracking system. And I've done a lot of pairing with developers, and it really does, even while they're writing production code, and we could prevent a lot of bugs from escaping into production, and it helps them learn testing skills also. So agile testing, the second principle is delivering value to the customer, and that supports the idea from modern testing, principle 5, that the customer judges the product's level of quality. And today's technology means we can quickly learn what customers think of the product by looking at how they're using it in production. And we also have to remember that most products have more than one customer or user persona or role. And also a lot of us have both internal and external customers that we need to satisfy. So those customers, we depend on them to tell us, is our product meeting their needs? When teams I'm on have done our pre-iteration planning meetings, the first question we always ask of each theme or epic or story is why? Why are we doing this? What's the purpose? What problems is it solving for the customer, for the business? We focus our testing around what is valuable, and we get real data from production to find out what that is. We have the tools today to do that. And so that fits with principle number 6 of modern testing, that data trumps intuition. Face-to-face communication, of course, this is all face-to-face on video nowadays, but it's the most effective ways that testing practitioners can accelerate the team, as Britt and Alan say, accelerate shippable quality, and encourage continuous improvement. So, it's a key component. Communication, real-time communication is essential for building that culture of quality. And again, we can do pairing and mobbing, and we can do that remotely very easily. So, in my own new job, everybody's super busy, but most people can spare 30 minutes or an hour to pair up and talk about something or work on something together. So these relate to modern testing principle number 2 of removing bottlenecks, number 3, always learning and improving, and number 4, leaking that quality culture. We need to communicate to do that. Now, deciding to stop acting as a safety net for developers and collaborating with them to improve their own code correctness and the testability of the application, that can require a lot of courage on the part of a tester or QA professional. And we really care. We really worry that there are risks, and we want to do all the testing we can to mitigate those risks. But we need to back that up. We need to catch those problems earlier, shift left, if you will. So we need to get the developers involved and have them do this. So modern principle number 7, everyone can test. That takes courage as well, especially with the Britt and Alan's idea about working themselves out of a job. We love our jobs. We don't want to stop doing them. And again, I think that in most domains, we're going to still need dedicated testing specialists. But at the same time, it's clear that when teams leave quality to a few testing specialists, those teams are not going to perform well. Their products are not going to be very good quality because we can't test quality into a product. I think Kim Kainer said that many years ago. And so I know I've fallen into the trap of being so concerned about a release about to go out. I work late or over the weekend, everybody else has gone home. well, they already are at home, but they've stopped working. This is a problem for the team to solve. When we have risks and we need to mitigate those risks, we need to look at those together. And I've seen T-shirts at testing conferences that say something like, test your code, and that's where this comes from. Developers need to be able to do that. Now, keep it simple. How simplicity relates to the modern testing principles, it's less obvious to me. And I think a lot of people who look at the modern testing principles feel overwhelmed by them. I don't know if you're having that feeling as I'm going through them. So start simple. Take one small step at a time. And that's true for any kind of learning or continuous improvement. Experiment with them. Simplicity for testers is also, I think, a difficult principle to implement. Propose a simple experiment. Try to find the simplest thing that could possibly work, as we used to say in extreme programming. So I was on a team where we were experiencing long cycle times and a high rejection rate for our story. So we would deliver stories to the product owner, and the product owner would say, that's not what I wanted, and send them back. So I tried to get initiatives or practices like behavior-driven development. I thought that would help build the shared understanding and prevent those problems. But that was too much for the team at that time. So I thought, well, example mapping from Matt Wynn, that's a very simple technique. And I asked the team, could you spare 30 minutes? And I'd like to have a little workshop to try this. And they did that, and they were pretty happy with, how can we easily identify business rules and concrete examples to illustrate those rules. So I said, can we experiment with that in the next pre-iteration planning meeting, our next 3 amigos meeting with a couple developers, a product owner, and testers. And yeah, it's a simple technique, and they eagerly adopted it. They immediately saw the value. The cycle time went down, rejection rate went down. So don't boil the ocean. Just do one little thing at a time. That's an example of just taking one step. Okay, continuous improvement. Agile testing principle number 6, modern testing principle number 3. It's a core practice for any team embracing agile development, transforming to a DevOps culture, and wanting to be a higher performing team. So this is where retrospectives are super valuable. And as testers, maybe our job isn't to facilitate retrospectives, but I find that facilitation skills are really valuable to us as testing consultants and coaches. And we need to be able to help people learn. And so learning to facilitate retrospectives is a great way to ramp up your facilitation skills. So offer to facilitate retros in your team and make those retrospectives effective. Make them focus, get the team to pick one thing to work on, the biggest problem, come up with experiments to make that problem smaller. So responding to change, that's that's agile testing principles number 7. And I think it relates to modern testing number 3, always learn and improve, and number 6, data trumps intuition. So again, this is a key component for continual improvement. And again, as I just said, I found the best way to improve is identify the biggest problem that's in our way. Make that problem visible. I learned that from Janet. Find some way to make that problem visible. That was easier to do in a co-located office where everybody's working together. You could put something on the wall or whatever on a monitor. But we can do that on remotely too, virtually with our dashboards, maybe in our online project tracking tool, in Slack, in your source code control system, your wiki. There are a lot of places you can pop up messages in people's IDEs. Make these things visible. For example, in my last team, one of the testers created a dashboard of some really important quality metrics based on things like bugs coming in and how long it took to solve the bugs and how long it took to get things out the door. And he posted these every day in Slack. to give people a visual of where are some problem areas. So find out some way to make those visible and use data. Measure your progress. Use a hypothesis where you figure out how you're going to measure your progress and look at that progress every day. Self-organizing. That was a basic concept of Scrum and other Agile techniques. And we hope that teams will self-organize around their mission to deliver a quality product that solves our customer problems. So this goes back to the modern testing principle of leading a quality culture. And it really relates to all the modern testing principles. In my experience, teams that learn the business domain and focus on how they can provide more customer value are more likely to be successful. The highest performing team I was on started out, trust me, as complete chaos. But we got good leadership in learning how to self-organize, good coaching on how to do that, good coaching on how to manage our workload, focus on finishing one story at a time, using our retrospectives effectively, discussing problems together, and agreeing on experiments to try. So, for example, early on, we realized we'd fallen into a mini waterfall where we had 2-week sprints and all the stories were delivered on the next to the last day of the sprint, so that now we had to try to test everything. So we agreed together, let's make sure one story is finished by the second day of the sprint. And if extra help is needed on that story, other people in the team can join in. So that's an example of an experiment, and those are things you can measure. Focus on people. Back when I first started on an extreme programming team in 2000, I read a study by Alistair Coburn, who's a leader in the Agile development world, and he did a study, I think it was for his PhD actually, to find out what makes projects successful. Because we know, especially back in the 90s, most projects failed. Most software projects failed. So what makes them successful? And could it be the programming language they use or the platform they use or tools that they use? What is it? And what he found is people. People are the first order factor correlated to project success. You can still go read this study if you're interested. I'll provide you the link. The State of DevOps survey results also back this up. I highly recommend the book Accelerate, which is based on several years of data from the survey. This is real science. I love science. I love when my experiences are backed up by science. That could be my confirmational bias also. But that book Accelerate also goes into the kind of leadership that you need to transform your culture and become a high-performing team. Psychological safety, we know that's a prerequisite to team success. We have scientific data from studies at Google and other studies. I just recently ran across Amy Edmondson's 7-question survey to help gauge the level of psychological safety on a team. It's something that you could use at a regular interval to see how people are feeling. Make sure somebody is there to help remove impediments from your team. Sometimes for Scrum, that's a Scrum Master or a manager, whoever it could be. It could be a tester. And have empathy. We especially need empathy during this pandemic and all the difficulties that we're facing that we never expected to face. So it's very important. People. It's all about getting the right people and letting them do their best work. So, enjoyment. I think the modern testing call to action is pretty imposing when you first look at it. It's like, whoa, I don't know, that looks pretty different. And there's no reason to take that on. Those principles are not for you if you will not enjoy embracing them and letting them guide you. But I'm sure all of us really get a lot of satisfaction out of helping our team succeed, help our company succeed, help our customers solve problems, growing that culture quality. And I think it's really satisfying to help people who are not testers by profession learn things like exploratory testing, good automated test design, accessibility testing, security testing. There are things we can help them learn, and it can be hugely rewarding. And I hope that adds to your joy. Back in the extreme programming days, a lot of teams are still practicing that. There were 4 values, and a lot of people said the 5th value should be joy. And we should have fun at work. We should play. Edward de Bono, who's a leading researcher in things like cognitive bias, he found that humor helps us learn. It helps us think laterally. It helps us think outside the box. And we need that creativity. Our systems today are so complex. Our problems are so challenging. We need that creativity. And we need to play to try to maintain our mental health. So get your team together and play a game online, or have a virtual lunch. That's what my team does every week. So remember, these are not rules. They're not meant to be followed blindly. They're meant to be guidance when you have to make a decision, when you have to solve a problem. Look back at the principles. What do they tell you to do? And these principles don't go out of date. We might evolve them over time for sure. But really, there's nothing I would change in the agile testing principles. I like the additions in the modern testing principles. We might word them differently today, but the meaning behind them is still true. So, I'm on a quality team that we're trying to enable our engineering teams to learn how to build quality in themselves and take ownership of their testing activities. So as we think of the principles, we're thinking, how can we lead the way to build a quality culture? So one of the things we're trying to do is build a quality culture transition guide that we can give to teams, and it kind of helps them gauge what they still need to learn or what they need to improve, and helps them know how to do it. How do they get to the next step? How do they get to their goals? And again, that's something that takes courage, and it's a big challenge to keep it simple and not overwhelm people with it. So I am curious, which of these principles most resonate with you, or are there some that you really take issue with? And I'm going to just leave this up for a minute and let you think about that before we start talking about the questions. Just starting my stopwatch to see. I'm just going to give you a minute to digest some of that. I know this silence this dead air is challenging, but write down some notes about what you like here, what do you think would help you and your team. It's pretty hard to distill those modern testing principles down to just a few words, and so I'm glad Alan did that for a presentation he did at Test Bash Home. This is the first time I've done this presentation, and I didn't want to go over time because I wanted a lot of time for questions and discussions. So went a little more quickly than I thought it would. So I'm happy to take lots of questions and take lots of time. All right. Maybe take a screenshot of that to help you while we're talking about it. So I do welcome questions now or reach any time to me. I'm Lisa Crispin on most things like LinkedIn and Twitter. I just have to show another gratuitous donkey picture here. Those are my donkeys. And then again, I'll make these slides available, and these are some links for more information, including that webinar by Melissa, which I think is a really good way to really learn the modern testing principles. So that's all I have, and I don't know how, if you just Smita, if you just take control back, yes, or is there something I have to do?
No, we can let your screen be up there, and yes, we do have quite a few feedbacks, thoughts coming in, and So we have questions also, but what I'm going to do is first share the thoughts that people shared on your last screen. If you want to move to that screen where you have compared the two. And
oh yeah, that's a good idea. You're thinking. I'm glad you are. Although I'd rather not
yes,
the donkey picture, but you know.
yes. So I no, I have learned thinking from you also. So yeah. So a couple of inputs here coming from the audience, the attendees. Let me just read them out for you. First one is Ivan. He says, everyone can test is flawed. And there is from Angela, where she says, have courage. I believe she's picked one. And Anthony says, all of these seem to compete for top priority. It's a challenge to balance all continuously. Then there is Diana, who says, love 9 and 10, people and enjoy. And then there is another input that says, in my experience, okay, that's a question, so I'm going to
Well,
move
can I
that.
can I comment on any of those?
Yes, yes, please,
So,
please. That's the
so the
idea.
everyone can test. I think I understand. I mean, yeah, everyone can test. I know people don't like that statement because it kind of it kind of goes back to the days when people thought, oh, we can take anybody off the street and put them in a corner and give them some scripts and make them a tester, and yeah, definitely that's not what I'm talking about. But everybody can't be an expert at testing, but for example, I think, and it's my experience, that everyone can learn some basic exploratory testing skills, for example, or perhaps, depending on who they are, they could maybe learn a little bit of security testing using Chrome, using Bug Magnet or something like that. I mean, I don't think everybody can become an expert and have deep skills in testing, but I think they can learn some things because I for 20 years now, I've worked on teams where I've helped developers learn how to do better at automated test design, do better at exploratory, or learn some exploratory testing, learn some accessibility testing. In fact, I learned accessibility testing from a developer. Performance testing. There are lots of the types of testing that different people on the team can do. Designers, they already are doing user experience testing, usability testing. So Janet and I once sat down and tried to make a list of all the types of testing we could think of, and we stopped at about 100. So there are lots of different testing activities. So everyone can test. I know that's simplistic, but I don't think that Alan and Brent really mean it quite that way. It's just that they can take more responsibility for making sure that testing activities get done. And yeah, I get what you say, that it's a challenge. I can't remember who said it, but it's a challenge to balance them all. And how do you prioritize? And definitely, I think you have to you have to prioritize and do one thing at a time. So thanks for
All
all that
right.
feedback, though.
Yeah, there are two more comments, and after that, we'll go to questions. First one is from Marco saying, nice principles. I think we all should have own set of principles. Those would act as a North Star to give direction. Since quite often teams, customers are lost on what they want from testing.
I like that North Star idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. And the next comment is, I like the agile testing principles most, although you did a great job of relating the agile testing and modern testing principles. We actually do both and have our modified version of both.
Awesome.
Yeah. The other one says, I think someone says, love the focus on people. And then there is the similar comment. I dislike the statement, everyone can test. In most companies, it's interpreted as if you can fog a mirror, you can test. It needs to be better qualified. Remove the idea that testing is a pure commodity.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. These principles all work because we do these every day. Are we perfect at it? No, but we do our best.
Awesome. That's great to hear.
Yeah. Great. Yes. Similarly, again, the last comment was everyone can test, but not everyone can be great at it. Just a feedback. Surely,
Yeah.
yes, taken and well
Definitely.
explained. Yeah. So I'll go back to, we have quite a few questions here, Lisa, and we'll
Okay.
start asking you those. Now, the first one is, how do you help a developer with code if you don't know how to read code?
How do you help a developer code if you don't know how to read code? That's an excellent, excellent question. Uh, and I've done a lot of developer tester pairing. Now I can read code to some extent because I started off my life as a programmer, or my professional life. But that said, like, I can't code Java, for example, or JavaScript. So when I pair with a programmer who's doing that, they have to explain it to me, right? And when I ask questions and they have to explain what they're doing, so many times, well, I'm a good rubber duck. So many times as they're explaining to me, they realize they've done something wrong. So just by being there, asking questions, we're adding value and helping them design that code better and think about it better. And when I've paired with developers, sometimes we do strong style pairing, which means that you switch the driver and navigator role. So if I'm the driver, I'm the one who has to type, but the developer tells me exactly what to type. And when I'm the navigator and the developer is the one typing, I can't write code, but I can write pseudocode. So I can just say in English what I think the code should do. And I'm just really, and then they turn that into the actual code, and it's surprisingly effective. So I do encourage people to learn coding patterns and principles and be able to make some sense out of the code. But it's not necessary because the person who knows how to write the code is sitting right there with you. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, absolutely, Lisa. In fact, I learned this today from you too. So, because this was always a question for me too. Like sometimes when you don't know how to read code, how do you help the developers? So, great suggestion there. Um, Next question here is, engineers can test their code, but how do we ensure that they go beyond validating that the code that they built works, but also validate to the acceptance criteria of the customer?
Yeah,
Do
it's an important conversation to have with a team. And what my teams have found is if we give the developers, if we help them learn some exploratory testing skills, for example, how to write I liked the charters that Elizabeth Hendrickson has in her book Explore It. So using personas, using charters, but having the developers test at the story level. So they think they finished with a story or a piece of a feature. They're ready to commit that to the source code control. Now they should stop and hopefully they've automated a test for it. And now we want them to stop and do some manual testing. And in addition to pairing with developers and having workshops for them how to do exploratory testing, another developer and I at a couple of team I was on a couple years ago, we wrote a little exploratory testing checklist, which I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but it was just a little like 7 or 8 steps to remind them some things to do. Like try it in different browsers. Get out Elizabeth Hendrickson's testing heuristics cheat sheet, which we had sitting around the workspace and available online. And try some of those different heuristics. Try the bug magnet Chrome extension and try some of the different kind of things there. And so we just had a list of things for them to try. And we had that checklist pinned to the Slack channel so that it was easily available to them. And then that was just testing at the story level, right? So we had very small stories to test when a bunch of stories for an epic were completed and we could start testing at the feature level. We wrote charters for those for exploratory testing of those features and put them into our backlog as user stories along with our feature stories to make them visible. And then anyone on the team could start doing those exploratory testing charters, and we often paired on those as well. And so to do it at a bigger level, and like you say, to make sure not only does it meet the acceptance criteria, which we can write, a lot of times we can write executable test for that and automate for a lot of those things. But for quality attributes that you can only see by looking at them yourself, that was a really good way to do that. And so we used release feature flags so that we could hide. We were trying to do continuous delivery, and so that we could hide those features and do trunk-based development. And when we completed enough exploratory testing to feel confident, and then any other human-centric testing we needed to do too, like user acceptance testing or accessibility or security or performance, any other kind of testing that we needed to do, we could keep it hidden in production until we were ready to turn it on. And so it was kind of a multi-tiered approach. And that was just something we arrived at over time through different experiments. And that ended up quite reducing our cycle time and reducing our failures in production, because we were more likely to discover the unknown unknowns of, oh, this impacts another part of the system, we didn't realize that, or we didn't implement this feature flag correctly and it's not working like we expected. So those kind of, we need to do that kind of work.
That's pretty insightful, Lisa. Here's another question for you. It is from Anu, and she says, I would like to organize a small quality workshop for an agile team who are already doing well. What will be your advice?
So a small quality workshop for an agile team, and they're already doing what?
That's right. So what is your advice? How to go forward?
No, I missed what they. I think you said they were already doing something. What was that something?
So who are already doing well. So probably her
they're
agile
already
team.
doing well. Already doing
Yes.
well. Well, I would maybe in the retrospective, are there any problems that are holding the team back or annoying the team? I can't imagine not new problems not coming up all the time. That's been my experience, that new things always come up. So I would look at, what's an obstacle in the way of our team, and is there some experiment we can try to make that better? And so maybe we can do a workshop around that. I think personally there are always lots of quality related things I could think of if I could get my team's time to have a workshop with them. But I would just let the team decide what do they want to learn, what do they think would help them, what do they think would solve a problem, or what do you think could help them solve a problem?
Absolutely. I think I like that suggestion, that if the going is good right now, maybe target being great and look at what you could do to kind of become even better.
And spend some time celebrating what's going well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moving on to the next question, Lisa.
Okay.
In my experience, often team members know and are experienced with agile approach. What are some ways we can help get management buy-in? That is my company's biggest challenge.
Yeah, this all sounds great and like unicorn land, but then if your managers get in your way. You have to learn. I mean, I think it's up to us to educate managers. They all say they want quality, but they don't really know what that means or what kind of investment might be needed for that. And we do need their support. So for example, I was talking about helping the developers on my team learn exploratory testing. I think that was helped a lot by the fact that the development managers put exploratory testing skills in as part of the skills developers needed to learn to go up the levels in their career to advance. And so that helped with their motivation. They needed to get these different exploratory testing competencies because management understood how valuable, how much they needed exploratory testing. If your management doesn't understand that, then you have to try to find a way to put that into terms they'll understand. And especially the higher up you go, they're more concerned about cost and what is, how's it going to save them money? And we can make really good arguments about that, talking about opportunity cost, because we spend all our time fixing bugs and not developing new features. The technical debt is slowing us down. The impact on our brand if a bad problem gets out to production. So there are lots of different ways we can bring that in. There's a book, a pretty new book out called Leading Quality by Ronald Cummings John and O.I.'s Peer that is really written for managers, for executives, to help them understand why quality is so important and what's, how do you speak their language? I highly recommend that book, and if you can get the managers to read it themselves, so much the better. It's a nice small book. Janet and I, one of our motivations for writing our latest book, Agile Testing Condensed, was we realized managers are not going to pick up a 550-page book about agile testing, but they might read a really short book under 100 pages about agile testing and get the basics. So find some ways, and also make your testing visible, make the value you're adding visible. Mike Lyles did a talk yesterday in the online test conference about that. Show the value you're contributing, show the contributions that your team is making, find a way to make that visible. It's so important, and it's really part of leadership, making everyone aware of the contribution you and your team are giving, what the quality is helping. So there are lots of different metrics you can use, a lot of different ways that you can look at that.
Great, Lisa. I'm going to quickly move on to the next question. Can you give examples of taking continuous feedback and using that information in continuous improvement?
So taking customer feedback? Is that what you said?
Doesn't mention here, it says continuous feedback.
Oh,
taking continuous feedback. Yeah.
Sure. So my teams have found it really helpful, although hard to do, we have a new feature idea. We have to try to slice that feature down to some really thin end-to-end slice. So a lot of people call that a minimum viable product from the lean startup world. Ardita Karaj calls it a learning release. So we want to get something out in front of customers and get their feedback, but we don't want to invest too much in it because maybe they won't like it. And the nice thing about that today, I mean, of course we can do a lot of low fidelity user testing, even in the design, as we're designing a new feature, and just use paper mockups or something and get feedback. And that's all great, but there's nothing people don't know what they want until they can put their hands on and use it. So getting that first slice of something in production and then watching with that means we have to have instrumented our code and have good tools to help us see what people are doing in production. But for example, the last team I was on was really good at this. And so we put a new page in our user interface to help teams. Our product was an automated test tool, and we decided it would be really useful to give people information about test coverage. So we came up with a user interface to show test coverage of the tests that they were running. And we were really excited about this feature. We thought it was really great. But we did do as thin a slice as we could and put it out in production. And we immediately saw, first of all, very few people used it. Very people even went to the page. So that was obviously a problem. It was not discoverable. And the people who did get to the page, it was clear from what they clicked on and how little time they spent on the page that they didn't even understand it. And so we knew that we needed to go back and redesign the user experience, make that more discoverable. We still thought that the functionality was worthwhile if we could get the customers to look at it, and indeed we did. We got a redesign on it, and again, just like, okay, if we redesign this, what will happen? Can people find the page more? Good. And just step by step improving that until we could see that new feature being adopted. So that's an example. And maybe we wouldn't have succeeded, but hopefully we would have discovered that before we put too much time in it.
Great. Lisa, we have a couple of more questions. I'm going to take at least 2 more because we might run out of time after that. But okay. Meanwhile, there is a request. Can you please add the name of the book on quality for leaders and executives to the deck at the last page?
Oh, you bet. Okay.
If you can add that.
Leading quality.
Okay.
I actually, I read the print copy, and I also listened to the audiobook, and I highly recommend the audiobook because Ron reads it himself, and he gets so excited about it that he actually goes off script. He's so enthusiastic. So it's always fun to hear people who are passionate about quality.
All right. So I just sent that. Yes. Done. Okay. Here is the next question. And thank you, Lisa, for sharing the book.
Hmm.
What advice would you have for a team that wants the product owner to also test?
Well, yes. I mean, in my opinion, that's part of the product owner's job because it's up to them to accept the stories. Um, I think I would suggest an experiment and ask the product owner if they might be willing to pair with a tester or someone else on the team to do testing for just 30 minutes, maybe. Or maybe to reduce the pressure on the product owner, maybe you could have a bug bash and get several people on the team and pair up or do mob testing just to introduce them to it because, you know, once they see some good ways to test, good testing techniques, and once I think this is true for developers too, when they start finding bugs, they get really excited about it. They're like, oh, this is so cool because I didn't want this bug to be in production. But product owners, they're definitely strapped for time. What my team did when I was on the Pivotal Tracker team was we did mob acceptance testing. So when we had, when a couple of developers, we did everything in pairs there, had 4 or 5 stories ready for the product owner to accept, we got in a mob with the developers, the product owner, the designer, and someone from customer support and a tester. And we used the mob programming format of a driver and navigator, and we switched every story. So when we started testing a new story, we switched roles so that everybody on the team could suggest things to do in the test and observe what was going on. And the great thing about that is if we had a question, it's like, is that UI element in the right place, or does that graphic look correct? The designer is right there in the room and can say. If we're wondering, gee, is this error handling what we want, or should this field be required? The product owner is right there and can answer. So you have 0 question queue time. And we could get through 4 or 5 stories and accept them in 30 minutes. Whereas before we did that, the product owner was supposed to do acceptance testing. Of course, the testers and other people did too, but they had the final word. And so what would happen is they would stack up, and he would sometimes not get around to it for days. And meanwhile, the developers have gone on to new stories, and then suddenly they get a story come back to them, or bugs come back to them days after they thought they were finished with it, which is really bad. It requires task switching. So that was a really good way to handle the acceptance testing. So there are a lot of good approaches, and again, that's a problem for your team to talk about and see what experiments you'd like to try.
Great. Um, so we have so many questions still, Lisa. What we were going to do is we will send these questions to you, and if there are any questions that are unanswered and you would be very interested in answering them, you could send your responses, and we will just publish them on the blog site.
That sounds great.
Does
I'm
that
happy to
work?
do that.
Yeah. Yes. So I'll just finish with the last question here for now. That is a very interesting question asked by Tracy. How would you teach someone who has not tested before to test? And if you only have about 4 hours.
How to teach somebody to test?
Yes, and they
That's the
haven't
question.
tested before.
They
How
never
would you
tested
teach
before.
yes,
I
who
would,
has not
I would,
tested before?
yeah, I would definitely do strong style pairing. So we would trade off the driver and navigator role. And so when it's their turn to be the driver, I'll tell them exactly what to type. And then when it's their turn to be the navigator, they can just, if we're testing a UI, for example, they can just look at the screen and say, well, I think maybe I think we should do this, and tell me what to type. And so I'm there to answer their questions about how to test. Hopefully they already know the application, but even if they don't know the application, it's a great way to learn it. So strong style pairing is the most effective way I've found to teach somebody to test. And of course, there's a lot of self-study people can do. We have all these great resources. Well, we have SCPCon and all the resources available here. A lot of great sites out there where you can get introductory classes. There are a lot of great books, but I think the hands-on testing, I like that the best.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you so much. I would request you to please take us to the last slide where we have your contacts and classes and those details.
There's my email, Lisa at AgileTester.dca, or Lisa at LisaCrispin.com. You can just Google me and then the resources again. But I'll leave you with the donkey picture.
Yes. Yes. So everyone, please feel free to reach out to Lisa for any questions you have or any guidance you need, and definitely follow her on Twitter. Thank you, Lisa. It was a very insightful session on agile testing.
It was my pleasure.
Okay,
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to get to participate in your webinar.
Thank you. You shared some awesome details. That really helps a lot. And I'm sure our attendees found it to be very informative and useful. Thanks again, Lisa.
All right.
All right. So, folks, everyone here still remaining, this concludes our webinar for today. Thank you for joining in, and most importantly, thank you for being so engaging and making the most of the webinar for yourself and for the whole group. Stay tuned for more webinars at softwaretestpro.com. We have an upcoming webinar, which is quality-focused software testing in critical infrastructure on the 27th of this month. The speaker is Zoe Owens, who is the firmware test engineer at Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories. In this webinar, Zoe will explain how to focus on quality without breaking the bank when it comes to critical infrastructure. If the subject interests you, please do sign up for the same at softwaretestpro.com. And before I leave, let me also remind you the call for submissions for the webinars is open and is going to remain open all year round. Please do send in your proposals as soon as possible at the given link. Thank you, everyone. God bless you, and please stay safe and healthy. Practice safe social distancing, and good luck for all you do. Thank you.